Hello, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Gabriel Ramirez, and this is my review for Ride to Hell Retribution. Ride to Hell Retribution leaves you in awe in the most negative way. Frame rate drops, unrendered assets, clipping, game-breaking bugs, glitches, and broken controls happen all the time when we play games. Fallout 4 has some pretty bad frame rate drops. Sometimes you load into Red Dead Redemption and it takes some time for the ground to become detailed. Kingdom Hearts can have some pretty janky controls and aren't as smooth as you wish it was. Even so, they don't distract from the overall experience. These things are like getting pebbles in your sandals. It happens from time to time, but you move on. All the problems that I listed happen repeatedly and sometimes simultaneously. At first, all these errors seem comedic and you can't help but laugh. But then you realize that the entire game is going to be like this. It's like if you're going on a hike that's being led by someone. He trips a couple of times and he can't help but smile or giggle. As he keeps tripping over himself, you realize he's blind, and you're going to feel bad. Then after a while, you realize that you're never going to get to the end of that hiking trail at this rate, and so you get angry and frustrated. That blind man is this game. Ride to Hell Retribution is plagued with technical issues. The loading times aren't long, but the question isn't how long the loading times are, but what exactly is loading during these loading screens. More often than not, either the level textures or the character textures will not load in when the gamer zooms from the loading screens. There are cutscenes where Jake Conway, our protagonist, talks to a character and that character will not have properly loaded in. The lack of any details on the character model could last up to a minute before the textures pop in. That means you'll be speaking to someone that looks like a blob with eyes and a mouth rather than a human being. Other times the desert outside the roads you drive down are completely smooth because the textures haven't loaded in, so it looks like you're driving past gigantic piles of cake batter. That being said, when everything is properly loaded in and looks the way the designers intended, it's still no marvel to behold. The characters look like Guitar Hero rejects, and I'm talking about the first Guitar Hero. The one from the PS2 era, not even the PlayStation 3 Guitar Hero. And the overall level design is just poor. Not only is the level design poor, but it also just doesn't make any sense. The highways you drive down are littered with abandoned cars and huge cargo 18-wheelers parked perpendicular to the road to force you to go around or slide underneath. This would be logical if it were an abandoned highway, but there are always cars driving down the same road, so it makes no sense how the driving sequences were designed. The sound quality of the game has no redeeming value either. The voice acting of the game is just lazy.
Would be nice to know who you are.
It's nobody's. It's just a jacket.
Look, lad, this is the part where you beg for his life. You understand?
He's just a kid.
It sounds as if the actors just didn't care while they were reading their lines. They most likely drew their inspiration from the cardboard box they recorded in. There is no feeling behind any of the delivered lines.
Damn, Mikey. Mac wasn't kidding. You've gotten to be one tall sack of shit.
Ah, shut up. You look the same too, Jake. But your face is kind of weird.
It's almost as if everything was being sarcastically delivered with little to no emphasis on the emotion. I mean, it's not so much, as it is, gee, I'm angry. I need to sound it. Jake Conway's rage mode yell sounds like a grunt that we all make in the restroom after a meal that went right through us. The music is also pretty bad. One track from the game's soundtrack is just an instrumental version of a Nirvana song that has been tweaked just enough for the game's development team not to get into legal trouble. Sometimes, despite looking and sounding poorly, a game can control well. Ride to Hell Retribution is not one of those games. For a game that is centered on MCs, which stands for motorcycle clubs, controlling a motorcycle is the most difficult aspect of this game. Accurately controlling yourself in a motorcycle segment is an impossibility. Rather than swerving from lane to lane to just barely dodge incoming cars and obstacles, it becomes a ping pong table of either just barely missing an obstacle or literally bouncing to and fro. It just doesn't feel like a motorcycle, it feels extremely heavy. The on-foot segments are not any good either. Aiming a gun in a firefight is difficult, and the fighting sequences feel like an extremely early build of a Batman Arkham game or Sleeping Dogs. It's extremely unpolished, but more times than not, it's easier to run up to an enemy and beat them to death rather than shooting them. Both the driving and on-foot segments are extremely repetitive. Once you play the first two levels, you've basically played the entire game. There's very little variety. In driving segments, you drive from point A to B while you fight off enemy bikers, and then on-foot segments, you go from point A to point B and fight the same exact enemies. Granted, most games fit this description, but Ride to Hell Retribution makes you feel it. The literal elements to Ride to Hell Retribution are just as bad as its technical aspects.
It's our dads, okay? It's our fucking dads!
And who might your father be?
William Conway.
Toledo Conway?
The whole game is basically about Jake Conway on a quest to avenge the death of his little brother Mikey by killing the entire Devil's Hand MC. There is no characterization for any of the characters, so when someone dies, you feel no remorse, guilt, or sense of accomplishment. They die, and you move on. The same feeling goes for the main characters, like the protagonist, Jake Conway. The writing gives you no reason to support him besides the reason that you are playing as him, and therefore it is your objective. The game tries to create suspense, but it is done so poorly that you don't even care by the time the revelation comes. The treatment of women in this game is also extremely negative.
What a fine piece of man you are. You look like you need some oiling. Wanna get greasy?
Business before pleasure, sweetheart. You know where I can find Carlos?
Try that way. Pussy here, dope there.
So you got it? Wow. Did you hurt him?
He did mention something about needing a long nap.
Now, let me show you what a mechanic can really do. This girl can do a lot more than just start an engine.
Every woman that comes into contact with Jake is treated as a sex object. Exaggerated, helpless, hourglass figures walk into a scene. Jake helps them. Jake has sex with them. Jake leaves them. Sometimes they give them valuable information for purely video game reasons to advance the plot, but that reason alone is not enough to justify their treatment in the game. Not to mention the sex scenes are also done poorly. Jake has sex with all these women with their clothes on. They try to position the cutscene game camera above the waist, but sometimes you catch a glimpse of the jeans still on the women having sex with Jake. Plus, like plenty of the scenes in the game, most of the sex scenes add nothing to the overall experience. The original idea of the game being an open-world 1960s biker game just makes the execution of Ride to Hell Retribution look far worse, because the original idea had potential. How an open-world 1960s biker game that would give insights into the world of motorcycle clubs became this abomination is extraordinary. The game had its difficulties during its development, which makes sense, but it would have been better off staying in developmental hell, where it could have died with dignity, rather than being released upon the world. So my conclusion and recommendation is the following. Ride to Hell Retribution should be avoided like the plague. Paying any amount for a game this awful would be a rip-off. You'll laugh at the game for the first hour, but after that it simply becomes enraging. Save your hard-earned dollars and watch a playthrough on the internet. If you're looking for a good biker game, Grand Theft Auto 4 The Lost and Damned is the way to go.